Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Tuesday, March 14th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. Missouri enters the NCAA Tournament as a number 7 seed, its best position since 2012. The Tigers are coming off a competitive SEC tourney semifinal loss to top-ranked Alabama after beating Tennessee in the quarterfinal. So why is MIzzou a betting underdog to a number 10 seed, Utah State, in the Thursday opener? Well, the Aggies are an excellent team. They won 28 games this year, but you better believe MIzzou coach Dennis Gates and his veteran team will use any slight in their favor. This is a Tigers team picked to finish 11th in the SEC, and MIzzou was seeded 4th in the conference tournament. On today's SportsBeat KC, star columnist Vahe Gregorian breaks down the Tigers, who will open tournament play in Sacramento, California. A victory on Thursday aligns them with the Arizona-Princeton winner in the South region. Arizona is the number 2 seed. Also at stake, Missouri seeks its first victory in the NCAA Tournament since 2010. It looks to end a 5-game March Madness losing streak. Okay, let's get started talking MIzzou with Vahe Gregorian. It's a great time of year. Love it, love it, love it. And it's so cool that we have all 3 of our teams, Missouri, K-State, and KU, in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2018. And you know why I remember that year, Vahe, specifically? Because you started your journey following MIzzou, and you joined me following Kansas State as you traipsed around the South. And that was a real fun time following at least Kansas State. Missouri got bounced in the first game, I think in Nashville or somewhere.
It was Nashville. And then you went from what was point X to we ended up in Atlanta. Where was the start of that?
I think we started in Charlotte. Kansas State started in Charlotte and won 2 games there. Then
and one of those games, wasn't that against Maryland, Baltimore County? The
University of Maryland at Baltimore County, which at the time was coached by one Ryan Odom, who is now the head coach of Utah State, which is Missouri's opponent in the first game.
All things converge, Blair, and 6 degrees of separation. When it comes to you, it's like 1 degree of separation. The other thing, though, we should not fail to mention, I guess, is the reason K-State was playing Baltimore, Maryland County was that the Retrievers, I think they were the Retrievers.
I think they were.
Chesapeake Retrievers, I think it's based on. They were very clear to say that at the time. They became the first team to beat a number 16 seed, to beat a number 1 seed in Tony Bennett's Virginia team, which was – so you were there for that. That was pretty spectacular.
Because Kansas State had already beaten Creighton in a really good 8-9 game. K-State was the 9. And so I was back in the media room writing about that game. And, UMBC had a halftime lead over Virginia. That's kind of interesting. That's nice for the Retrievers. And but Virginia will get things, top seed Virginia will get it sorted out in the second half. Instead, the margin grew and grew and grew. And, finally with 10 minutes to go in the game, I had to get out there and cover it and certainly pay attention to it. And that's what I did. It was an amazing scene in Charlotte to see UMBC, which, by the way, their athletic director, I don't know if it's still the case. Their AD at the time was Tim Hall, who had gone from UMKC to become the UMBC athletic director. So all kinds of connections and going on there. But yeah, we're going to talk about MIzzou and Utah State, the game, but let's talk about the Tigers' season. It has been an amazing one. They were 12-21 a year ago in Conzo Martin's final year. The year before that, which was the COVID year of the NCAA tournament, the one where they played in empty buildings, all in Indianapolis, or mostly empty buildings. They went to the NCAA tournament. Missouri was in there. Remember, they lost to Oklahoma in an 8-9 game, Lon Kruger's Oklahoma team. And so Missouri goes into the following year, coming off an NCAA year with Conzo, but it was just a terrible season for the Tigers. They make the coaching change. Dennis Gates gets the job. We didn't know much about Dennis Gates, right? 3 years at Cleveland State, spent the previous 8 or so on the Florida State bench with Leonard Hamilton's staff. This has exceeded, I think, anyone's reasonable expectations of what this season could be for the Tigers. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely, Blair. And you're right. I mean, Dennis Gates' name was one of those, for me, that I just came to learn during that search, right? And like, okay, let's study who might be out there. And then luckily I'm not on the search committee and because you'd like to have an astute judge of who these people are be involved. But I guess the real point I'm making is that Desiree Reed-Francois had her on his list from the time he was at Florida State. And I believe that goes back to her time at Virginia Tech, where she was already kind of studying the lay of the land on people that she might think would be up and comers for down the road. And part of that was her understanding of his important role with Leonard Hamilton's team as a recruiter, but also that he was understood to be dynamic, energetic, but rather serious person that way. It's funny, Blair, real quick aside, I was looking back at something I wrote last fall and how the players from his childhood refer to him as the sheriff because he was always so serious. And that sort of, I don't mean to say he's not fun, but I think you always see he's on point, on task in everything we do. And I think that is a little bit of a notable part of why this has happened. I mean, he's relentless in every phase of this job. He's relentless.
Yeah. He's consistent as well. And where you see it to me are in places like when the team leaves the court, either before, to go back into the dressing room before the game or at halftime or even at the end of the game, they circle up and win, lose, whether you're behind, whether you're feeling good, whether you're on the road or at home, they circle up and then jog into the locker room together as a team. And that might work easier if you had a squad full of 18 and 19-year-olds, freshmen and sophomores. But he's got guys that are 22, 23 in their fourth, fifth year of eligibility buying in. And that's impressive to me. That when you get the buy-in from leaders, something's working.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I would note, by the way, last night in Columbia that even after the selection announcement out on the court with the fans, they huddled before they left the court. So it's just like another game. But I love your point about buy-in, and it's something I've been thinking about and kind of find myself astounded by if you really think about this, right? 3 guys back. I think it's 8 transfers, 6, 2 junior college and 6 from mid-majors. Freshman Aiden Shaw. This is a hodgepodge, right? I mean, you could call it the island of misfit toys even to begin with. These things don't go together. And yet all the earmarks of how this team plays, right? It's in moments like what you just described, but it's also, to me anyway, the buy-in translates to the way they move the ball. And I mean, they're, among the nation's leaders in assists. Their shooting percentage is great. Why? Because they generally take pretty good shots. The 3-point percentage is great. They're among the nation's leaders in steals, in top 20 anyway. And they've also been really gritty at the end of games. I think this is right, 5-0 in games decided in the final moments. Maybe it's 8-0 in games decided in the final possession.
Wow.
Anyway, they're undefeated in those situations. And that to me is another little telltale sign of, a team that comes together in the crucible is a team that's connected. And that's absolutely a reflection of the coaching. And so to be able to do that so fast, I remember I went to the Penn MIzzou game early in the season, and Steve Donahue, the coach at Penn, this is 8 games into this era, was raving about seeing those telltale signs of the coach's impact on the team then. So props to him. By the way, quick funny aside that struck me last night also, as he was talking about, crediting everybody for their success, he started talking about what, they're excited to work on. And he was like, we're excited to execute our travel plan. And I was like, okay, but it just seems like he's really thinking about each aspect of the operation.
That's great. I'm kind of excited to execute my travel plan this week. That's kind of what March is about, executing travel plans.
That's exactly right. Anyway, they have to use this nugget to riff off. There might be a whole column in this.
That's right. Oh, man. So just to refer back to the Penn win was one of the, I don't know, 8 or 9 that Missouri played to open the season, and and not to disparage your Quakers, but not a top whatever 150 ranked team in the in any of the measures, which was the case with just about all of their opponents early on. And we've talked about this, and I think it's, as Missouri's on the cusp of entering the NCAA tournaments, it bears repeating that they chose to play this type of schedule, and it worked out, I think, perfectly for Dennis Gates and the Tigers. They got to kind of weld their team together against mid to low major competition. Got to build confidence, and look, and some things broke along the way for them. They won a buzzer beater. DeAndre Golston, the first of 2, deep buzzer beaters for him, was against Central Florida in the game that they played right after getting crushed by KU. I thought that was a big outcome for Mizzou, and I remember their post-game celebration on that, and just surviving. They beat Wichita State on the road in overtime. A Wichita State program that just fired their coach, but in the moment, that was a really big victory. They went on the road and won a game. That was their first road game. So the way that Missouri played in November and December, I think, helped set the table for them in December, when they hit that stretch of Illinois, Kentucky, and then the beginning of the SEC season, where we saw that this is really something. They've got something over here, and the crowds were coming back in a big way, filling up Mizzou Arena, especially the students. Great to see the students back in that building. So methods to the madness, and it just all seemed to work for Dennis Gates in Missouri this year. You're so right. And, I remember talking with you about this a little bit early on, and you with the notion that made so much sense that, and we might be writing about this more in the next week to come, about what kind of model is this for building a program, right? To draw from the mid-majors and to be able to do this to really sort of walk tall in these strange waters of the NIL and the transfer portal. I mean, it's like he has summoned all of this, through what could just be flux and difficulty, and it's not for everybody. But one point to go back to that I wanted to just add to what you said. So when they got blasted by Kansas, I think it was reasonable to think, boy, this was just fool's gold, and playing those teams didn't do them any good. But I think a few things, right? You'd come to see things like that how huge that Central Florida win was. And what that schedule early did enable them to do, I think, was not only gain confidence, but play with combinations and really learn the team sort of in real time, but with maybe a minimized risk. And if ever you had to learn a team and what you have, that was it. So then you get the key little pivot points where, okay, great that they won in dramatic fashion in Central Florida. What's that going to mean? And I don't know if it was the very next game, but it was certainly within a game or two after that. That was the Illinois game. Yep.
And to me, that was the one that really opened my eyes. I mean, because having been in St. Louis all those years and gone to a couple dozen of those games, that's NCAA tournament environment. Well, at least it is when you're playing not in Sacramento, but in Des Moines with your fan base able to come. I mean, that's a whole nother question we face here. But the idea of it being the pinnacle, and after having, I think we could make the case they weren't ready for the bright lights of Kansas, even though it was at home. That was part of what went on that day when they got crushed by Kansas. I thought that made a big statement about being able to play a really good opponent in a real spotlight and come through. And then Kentucky was after that, et cetera. So I think it's really interesting to see the little earmarks and pivot points that made this, where you start thinking, okay, there's something here. And again, we probably all came to it a little skeptically just because it was so improbable.
Right. In putting together a team, if Dennis Gates could draft a team and maybe you want a point guard, a shooting guard, a small forward, a power forward, a center. That's not the team he ended up with, right? They're still lacking a big man. They have a couple of point guards. They have these blurred positions for everything from the 2, 3, and the 4. But it all seems to work. Or in most of the season, it has. Demoy Hodge is somebody who's emerged as a real standout player, probably next to Kobe Brown, the go-to guy on this team. Really solid defensively, and then at various times, Nick Honor and DeAndre Golston, Trey Gamillion, everybody has pitched in along the way for this team. Sean East, even the backup point guard, has done it. And the player maybe most Missouri fans were excited about really hasn't done anything for him, and that's Isaiah Mosley, the Missouri State transfer. Had some led him in scoring in a couple of games, but for reasons that are still unclear, has not played in a majority of games for the Tigers this year. And if Missouri had floundered in the first year, I think it'd be a much bigger story than it is. And as it stands, it's not. It's not a big story. The Missouri is doing just fine, thank you very much, with the roster that it has now.
Yeah, and Blair, the way it's played out, I mean, I have no idea if we'll see him again this season or not. There was a little, I don't know if it was 6, 7 games in a row. I'd have to look back at the play-by-play, but where suddenly it's like, oh, maybe whatever was going on is behind him, and now and boy, he looked pretty good. And the more he played, the better he looked. So it's interesting to me that they've been able to keep such a lid on whatever it is, and I think under the umbrella of it being personal and private, and people have been respectful of that. But it's unusual in this era to have something be so unknown. But that's where it is. So you mentioned this to me when I was getting ready to go to Columbia the other day. I was out of town at spring training when senior day happened, but that scene in Columbia where Isaiah Mosley had no one there to escort him on that senior day, with Dennis Gates and Desiree Reed Francois running to his side and walking arm in arm with them. That was pretty powerful. And I think also testimony to the way he's connecting with his players. I don't have any way of knowing what his relationship specifically is with Isaiah, and whether this has been any of this has been a matter of saying you shouldn't play versus we're doing him a favor. We don't have any idea of that, but certainly you saw something meaningful in their relationship that day.
Very cool moment for Missouri and for Isaiah Mosley. So, hey, let's take a quick break, Vahe. When we come back, we'll take some calls. No, we won't do that, but but we will talk about Missouri and Utah State in the first round of the NCAA tournament. We'll be right back. Hey, this is Blair. There are several ways to access the Star Sports section. Let me tell you about a couple of them. There is Sports Pass. For $12.99 a month, you get unlimited digital access to all of the Star Sports content, including beat writing, columns, features, pretty much everything we write. The deal renews monthly until you tell us to cancel. For $159.99 a year, you get everything the Star has to offer digitally, including sports and the e-edition. Go to kansascity.com and drop down to the bottom of the page where it says Start a Subscription for more information. Your support has never been more important. As always, thanks for reading and listening. We are back on SportsBeat KC with Vahe Gregorian. We're talking MIzzou and the NCAA Tournament. It's great to have to say those words in the same sentence, MIzzou and the NCAA Tournament.
Well, it's the Kirchhoff tournament. We're all just living in it.
You probably covered the last Missouri victory in the NCAA tournament. Did you not?
I did. Buffalo, New York. That was Mike Anderson's, I guess it was his last Missouri team. They beat Clemson.
Yep.
And I'm thinking about guys like Kim English and Zaire Taylor. And it was a pretty good team that that the core, produced an Elite Eight run a couple of years before.
Right.
Maybe,
right.
Not just the year before, but maybe it was 2 years before.
In 2009. So the year before they did.
That was the year before. Yeah.
Damari Carroll was on that 2009 team that I think lost to, was it Connecticut in the regional final out in Phoenix?
Yeah. Yep. That was out in Glendale. And that was what, one way or another, that was what was on your mind as they went into that tournament. And they win their first round game. Then I guess it was West Virginia. I don't think it was a great game. I can't remember the score, but I don't think it was that close at the end. But at that point, you had every reason to think this is where Missouri was. There'd be continuity. But the smoke about Mike Anderson leaving was already in the air, and then he did go. And then, as you know, Missouri went all in on Matt Painter, only to get jilted at the altar. And suddenly they're scrambling. I think there was not a great backup plan, and they produced Frank Haith, who, I tell you what, for one regular season, it was brilliant. That was as fun a team as I can remember watching. I hate to keep harping on moving the ball, right? But it was a joy to watch that team. Remember those games here in KC against Notre Dame and I can't remember who else. They just demolished them.
California, Cal. Yeah.
Yep. And what if Dennis Gates was on that Cal team? No, he was out of school by then. Yeah. But that was great. I still can't really account for the Norfolk State loss, but it is what it is. But to your point, they have not won an NCAA tournament game since they joined the SEC. Right.
That's exactly right. And they're not favored. They're not a betting favorite to win this one. This one, even though they're the better seeded team, they're a 7 to Utah State's 10. Utah State's the betting favorite in this game.
Well, you gotta like how this will play for Missouri in the locker room. Nick Honor was talking yesterday about how they've been disrespected all season. I don't really remember that, but I think that if you're always looking for that opportunity, you can find it even when it's not there. And this will be a good one for them to use. I don't know how that factors into whether they win or not. I mean, sometimes you don't want to be overly emotional, right? It's finding that sweet spot of motivation and poise, and that's what this is going to be about.
Missouri played a terrific game, and I don't know, but it's not a game and a little more than a game and a half in the SEC tournament, beating Tennessee in I think maybe Missouri's best game of the season. They were just fantastic, and Kobe Brown had a really nice game, and then leading Alabama early in the second half, and that game didn't start to get away from the Tigers until under the 10-minute mark. They were very competitive against Alabama, which went on to demolish Texas A&M in the SEC tournament final. So Missouri, if we can, and this is not always the case when it comes to the NCAA tournament, but if Missouri can parlay the play that we saw in Nashville in the SEC into, this regional in Sacramento, I expect good things to happen for the Tigers. It's interesting, in Utah State, they are playing a team that attacks similarly. They like Utah State likes to shoot the three, gets it up early in the shot clock at times, and I don't know what the over/under this game will be, but strongly consider taking the over, because I do think we have a high-scoring game in our midst with Missouri and Utah State. So,
I don't know how much this will matter in the game, Blair, but it's just a point of interest. And you can correct me on this, but I believe this is the first time Utah State's been in the tournament in about 7 years, meaning
that's right.
That it doesn't have players unless they have a transfer to, I'm not thinking of, that it doesn't have players who've played in the tournament at all. Missouri, meanwhile, has, I believe it's 6 guys that have played in the tournament, but nobody that's ever played a winning game in the tournament.
Yeah, it hasn't won a game.
Yeah, and Coach Gates is 0-1 in NCAA play as a head coach. So what that all means, I guess, in a certain way, is it's an equalizing point. I mean, everybody's a blank slate when it comes to this, at least in terms of winning an NCAA tournament game. I tried to get Coach Gates to talk a little about this yesterday, but he just didn't want to go there. But how, in your experience, Blair, I wonder how you see this. Obviously, an NCAA tournament game is entirely different than regular season or even a conference tournament game, especially if you're going to be in the NCAA. Do you think coaches try to convince their players that this is just another game, or they try to make it that you understand this is not just another game? I mean, how do you see that generally playing out?
I don't know if there's a messaging quite like that, because the players are going to know as soon as they take the floor for practice, in a unfamiliar setting, and they're going to be in an NBA arena. It's just going to be a different environment for them, and when they take the floor for the game, I expect the arena to be, half to 3/4 filled, but only a small pocket of Missouri fans. The school only gets 400 to 500 tickets apiece. Each school does for the first round, and it's just going to be unlike anything you've experienced. I think having a roster with more than half of your players having at least experienced, the setting, that's going to help. I think you just have to, if you're a coach, you worry about the engine revving a little too hot when a game starts. You need to calm down a little bit. That's how you can get a team missing 8 of the first 9 shots, rushing through the offense or committing a foul that's more energy based than based on what you should be doing on the floor. So I think the team in a game like this, when you don't have a lot of NCAA tournament experience, the one that handles those situations the best, especially in the first few minutes, will have a bit of an advantage.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I don't think it's not like anybody's not understanding the implications of the moment. It's really, how do you hold them back and just, get your heart rate right.
Yeah. All right. So maybe it's, maybe we got a little regional bias here, but I do see Missouri carrying over its solid play in Nashville and winning on Thursday. What's the game time?
It's 12:40 Central, which means I don't remember ever being in this situation. I've been west a few times, but it means 10:40 a.m. Sacramento time, which is really odd to me.
That is totally odd. Oh my gosh. Okay.
I don't remember ever being at a game that started in the a.m. I've been at maybe some 11:50 a.m.
Yeah. I've done that. The first game of the tournament on Thursday is Maryland, West Virginia, and that starts at 11:15 a.m. But that's the first game of the tournament.
And that's probably actually are they playing East? I can't remember where they are, but it's probably actually starting at 12:15 their time.
I think that could be right. Yeah.
But so it's just weird, and look, that's a little factor. I mean, obviously time zones are time zones and sort of no big deal, but it's one thing to be getting used to the Pacific time zone and playing at 3 p.m. It's another to be like, okay, are you up yet?
Right. Right.
Better get to bed. Game's early tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. So I got 1:40 p.m. Eastern. So you're right. That would be 10:40 Pacific time. And that is bizarre, but there it is. Okay. How about you? You got Missouri winning one?
I think so. And then I don't know what to make of Arizona-Princeton. I suppose we should gather that most likely it would be Arizona, and I'm like the coaches. I got my blinders on for this game. I haven't really thought too much about that prospect. In fact, I have not even physically looked at the rest of the bracket. If Missouri were to emerge from there, I don't know what's next.
I don't have it in front of me. That's how kind of locked in I am on these first and second round games. But you're right; Arizona in all likelihood would be the second round opponent. So for the winner. So if they're in the South, this is the South region game, and we know that the one in the South is Alabama. I've got them going to the Final Four, by the way.
Yeah.
Terrific tournament run for the Crimson Tide. But anyway, all right, Vahe, let's close it out and see what the Tigers can do and get that first NCAA tournament victory in more than a dozen years. It'd be cool to see. And they've already set a record for most. They're 24-9, which is the most victories they've had as an SEC program. Their 11 wins in the regular season, and the SEC season was also a high. So we'll see if the good times continue for the Missouri Tigers. Vahe, thanks for joining us today, buddy.
Hey, thanks, Blair.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to Randy Mason for putting together the show, and to our SportsBeat KC staff of Monty Davis, Jeff Rosen, and Scott Chasen. Tip of the cap to Vahe Gregorian for sharing his insights. Morning Sports Edition, the nation's best digital sports section, was 37 pages today, packed with news about the NCAA tournaments, NFL free agency, the World Baseball Classic, the updates in the NBA, NHL, and everything else in sports. Check it out at liveedition.kansascity.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.